So this is a long story. Actually hearing the words, "your son has autism," struck me really hard. It hits you in a way I was not expecting. I'm gonna try to sum it up with just how we got Jesse diagnosed and what happened with that. I'm going to make videos on the process of getting Jesse services, moving, what it's like to try to find a school with special services, and our experience. When Jesse was in kindergarten, we had him tested for ADHD as it was recommended by the school. The closest testing center to us was in Parkersburg, West Virginia, which is where we had the test performed. They had a lot of questions for the parents and teachers, and also some observation on the psychiatrist's part. When we got those results, it came back with saying that Jesse had ADHD, possibly some other characteristics, but she wasn't sure. When she said that Jesse had ADHD, I questioned her because when we filled out the little questionnaire, it didn't come back with him having ADHD. But she said from what she observed, she believes he has ADHD and needs medication. I am not a strong believer in medicating kids unnecessarily. I do believe that there are lots of medications out there that are absolutely necessary for several children. However, I didn't want to take the chance of giving something to Jesse that he may not need. I asked for alternative options. The only thing that they could suggest was play therapy. So we tried that with 3 different therapists between kindergarten and 4th grade. None of them seemed to make a difference. It didn't change his behavior. It didn't change his attentiveness at school. It didn't improve any of his concerns. School was always a struggle for Jesse. So we tried to accommodate him and his work and give him less spelling words and less math problems to see if that would help. Unfortunately, anything that we tried between the schools and the teachers, nothing was successful long term. We did get some short-term improvement, but nothing that would last more than a week, 2 at max. In 4th grade, Jesse really struggled to try to do his schoolwork and or homework and to complete assignments. He started falling really far behind. We knew his reading levels were pretty far behind, so they tried to put him in different classes so he could get caught up on his reading. He knew his phonics, but he wasn't able to read at the 4th grade level. When 5th grade came around, Jesse bombed 5th grade. 5th grade was absolutely horrible for Jesse. It was so difficult for him to complete any work in school, at home, to complete any assignments, to learn any new material. Halfway through 5th grade, it was around December, January, we actually decided to get Jesse tested, but we wanted to get him tested somewhere where we knew the results would be 100% accurate. So we took him up to Nationwide Children's Hospital. It wasn't until April that we could get in for the appointment, but unfortunately that first appointment was only an assessment to see if he needed testing. We were concerned about maybe there was a learning disability as to why he couldn't learn new material. We were concerned that he may have ADHD, obviously, and then we were actually concerned about autism. And the reason we were concerned about that, he had displayed a couple characteristics through his childhood that would indicate that he might have autism. He was 1-2 years old. Instead of just playing with block Legos and stacking them together, he would only match them by colors. So he would only take the red blocks and put it on top of the red block. And then if you put a blue block on top of his stack of reds, he would take it off and then run all the way over to the other side to get that same color and put it on top of that block. He didn't get mad about it. He didn't get upset about it. He was always very loving, very emotional, very intuitive to other people's feelings. If I was sad, Jesse wanted to immediately give me a hug to try to make me feel better. Jesse was a people pleaser. Jesse wanted to make adults happy. He wanted to interact with other children. So the whole color thing and building blocks things just seemed like kind of a little OCD for him. He would also line up cars on a table all facing the same direction. Got to the point he got too many cars to fit on one table, and he'd pick it up and put it on one side and the other one would fall off the other end. So he'd pick it up and he'd put it back on that side and it would fall off the other end, and that would go on for about 5 minutes till he got mad and realized all of his cars weren't gonna fit on that table, so he'd just wipe them all off on the floor, playing with something else. So those are normally a couple of early signs of autism, but he didn't have the behavior issues. He didn't have the stimming that was noticeable. He didn't have any of the characteristics that you would naturally think of with a child with autism. When we went up for the evaluation at Nationwide, they agreed that they wanted to test him for all three of our concerns: autism, learning disabilities, ADHD, an IQ test to see where he was hitting. Unfortunately, they didn't have any more openings until August. At this point, this had been going on since December, January of 2018, 2019. We had the evaluation in April, that it would be August of 2019 before we could get the testing complete, and another month to get the results. So it would be September of 2019 before we'd actually know anything to be able to act on it. We realized before we went up there that there are very few services in our area and that we would probably have to relocate to get Jesse any services that he might need. Nationwide was very understanding. They made it work in their schedule so we could get Jesse tested at the end of June. We were so grateful for that. That was a really big deal, to not have to wait that extra couple of months to get the testing done. Then we'd have the summer to be able to make a plan and have something in place for him before the school year started. We didn't want him to start another school year to go into 6th grade and not know what he needs or how to help him. So in June, we took Jesse up to Nationwide to complete the testing. It was a very intense testing. It was an all-day event. We started at 9 a.m. and didn't get finished till 4 p.m. We did get a lunch break, and that was nice. The morning, Jesse went into a room to get the testing started. Jesse was tested for learning disabilities, his IQ level, his attentiveness, his ability to complete tests, his problem-solving ability, everything that they could possibly think of, they tested him for. Alan and I were taken into a separate room to answer a whole bunch of questions and explain what was going on with Jesse, what he'd been doing from childhood to now, our concerns, his behaviors. At lunch, we went and ate pizza and came back, and Olivia was asleep in the car. So I walked in with Jesse, and it was supposed to be just Jesse testing in the afternoon, and Alan and I were able to just wait around for about 4 more hours until Jesse was finished. But when I walked him in, the psychiatrist had actually asked if I wanted to come back and talk to her. And I said, sure. So they took Jesse back for more testing, and they took me in her office, and she said that they will have the official results in a few weeks. Once they complete all the testing, she'll get it to me as soon as possible. But from everything that they've observed already this morning, and from what we reported, she did have some information that she wanted to share with me. Since Alan was out in the car with Olivia, I asked her to hold on a minute, and I called Alan and put him on speakerphone, so that way Alan could hear everything the psychiatrist was saying. With Olivia asleep in the car, we didn't want a chance waking her up, because if you wake up a toddler from their nap, it's not a very pleasant afternoon, especially when you're driving over 2 hours home that evening. So as she summarized some of the things that we told her and some of the things that were observed in the morning testing, she said that she looked at me and told me that she believes Jesse does have autism and that we are definitely getting an autism diagnosis. And as I heard her say those words out loud, I started to tear up. Although we had suspected this, hearing it was an entirely different experience. And I am not an emotional person in public. I don't like showing my emotions. No matter how prepared you think you are, to hear a diagnosis like that, it hits you in a way I was not expecting. I, of course, held back the tears and listened to everything else she had to say, which was she suspects that they'll have more diagnosis when we come in a couple weeks, that it won't just be autism, that there'll be more things with it. So when I walked out of her office, I went to the car and I told Alan that I wasn't prepared for that. I wasn't ready to hear somebody say that your child has autism. I was worried for Jesse and what it meant. I was scared for him. I didn't want him to be treated different. That was my number one concern that I kept telling Alan, is I didn't want people to look at Jesse differently. I didn't want Jesse to be treated differently, because regardless of the diagnosis or not, from the day before to that day, he was still the same kid. That hadn't changed, and I didn't want anybody to ever treat him differently because of that. I told Alan that I wasn't ready to tell our family about the diagnosis, that I was not prepared for that yet, and I wasn't okay with letting people know. I was too afraid that somebody would treat him differently, and I didn't want Jesse to experience that. As a mother, you try to do everything that you possibly can to protect your child, and that was the only way I knew how to protect him until we could figure out what was going on, what we were going to do, and what this meant for him. So we had a couple weeks to look up schools for children with autism, and we were actually a little surprised to find that there were a couple in nearby states for us. So there were a couple options in about a 2 to 4 hour radius of West Virginia that we could look at. 2 weeks later, we went back up for the full testing results. It was a 2-hour appointment where the psychiatrist went through and explained everything that we reported to her, everything the psychiatrist evaluating Jesse had observed, everything that he completed on the test results, all of their answers and all of their reasons for coming up with each answer to get to the diagnosis. I found that really reassuring. Instead of just blurting out, "These are your child's diagnosis," she went through and explained to us the reason that they gave each answer on the test. When they were testing him for autism, the question was does he keep good eye contact? And actually that was one of our number one concerns, was eye contact. From what she observed while Jesse was testing, she was actually able to say that he kept good eye contact. And my first answer was, no, he doesn't. He does not keep good eye contact. I have to tell him all the time when I'm talking to him, look at me, look right at my eyes. I'm talking to you, you gotta look at me. And I'm guessing 12 years of telling him that is finally been able to kick in long enough for him to maintain some eye contact. So after they went through each part of the testing and the results, it came back with Jesse obviously having the autism spectrum disorder, the ASD, but that wasn't her main concern. Yes, he had autism, and we believed he would actually have pretty mild autism, that he would barely be on the spectrum. And for those of you that don't know, autism is a spectrum. It's a whole variety of diagnosis and symptoms. There's no one size fits all. It is a spectrum of children from one end to the other. Since nobody has ever really noticed that Jesse has autism, we figured that he'd barely be on the spectrum, that he would just be very high functioning, and that he would just barely be hitting those numbers to barely get on that spectrum. When she explained the test for the autism, if the child got a number of 6 or 7, that would be considered mild autism and barely on the spectrum. Jesse actually hit a 9 on that test. So he has moderate autism. For those of you who don't know, when they're diagnosing autism now, they have mild, moderate, and severe. Severe is more of the children who have trouble or may not even speak. Those children that can't really communicate. Mild would be the ones that are barely on the spectrum. It used to be diagnosed as aspergers, which isn't a diagnosis anymore. They've done away with Asperger's and they've just summed it all up into the autism spectrum disorder. When I explain to people what Jesse's symptoms are, they often refer to Jesse as Asperger's, and I imagine that if we would have got diagnosed 10 years ago, that may have been his diagnosis, but it doesn't exist anymore, so no, it's just all autism. The only thing we questioned on the test results for the autism was his eye contact. Even if they would have added in the points for his poor eye contact, he still would have hit the exact same moderate autism diagnosis. Along with the autism diagnosis, she diagnosed Jesse with a language-based learning disability, which scared me when she first said that. And then she said that it's commonly referred to as dyslexia. I'm like, okay, that's less scary. Dyslexia sounded way less scary to me than a language-based learning disability, but that's actually what dyslexia qualifies under. I wasn't really surprised by the dyslexia diagnosis, but I was surprised by how they came up with that diagnosis. When they went through all of his symptoms of the dyslexia, I'm like, that makes sense. That fits him perfectly. I get that. That's exactly what Jesse does. And I was surprised because when I thought dyslexia, I assumed that you were switching the numbers or letters or reading stuff backwards, because that is what people commonly believe dyslexia is. You invert numbers and letters or you read stuff backwards. But that is only one symptom of dyslexia. And not every kid with dyslexia has that symptom. So I was really surprised to learn that dyslexia is this whole language-based learning disability that described him perfectly and made perfect sense as to why he couldn't complete his schoolwork is because he didn't understand it. He couldn't read it. When the teachers had adjusted his schoolwork and read him a test, he did 10 times better than if he was given a paper in front of him and told him to complete a test, because he couldn't read the instructions, he couldn't read the questions, he didn't understand what it was saying, and it didn't make sense to him. Even if he knew the material, he couldn't be tested in that format. She also came back saying that his IQ actually tested above average. So he had been able to figure everything out on his own, and that's how he'd gone so long in school without being noticed with the dyslexia, is he was smart enough to be able to fake it, for lack of a better term, to get his work done that he could complete. What he was completing was just him being smart enough to figure it out on his own. The third diagnosis came back with ADHD, the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I did question her on that because I have a really hard time believing that Jesse has ADHD. He's not a really hyper kid. He's a very active child. Definitely has always been very active, but he's never been hyper. He's never been out of control. He's never been that little kid that you would describe bouncing off the walls. But when she explained that ADHD was more than just a hyperactivity, that ADD wasn't being diagnosed anymore and it's all ADHD, that his lack of organizations, his forgetfulness, all the other characteristics of ADHD came into play, that described him perfectly. Here's that kid that he would pack his lunch for school and I would tell him, don't forget to put your shoes on. He would go over, put his shoes on, and then walk out the door without even remembering his lunchbox. He would forget everything. His organization is non-existent. For lack of a better term, I am a very organized person, so his inability to keep stuff in a folder or keep the folders and books organized drives me nuts. With all three diagnoses, they call it a comorbidity, overlapping conditions with multiple diagnoses, because he doesn't have just one diagnosis, he has three. If you don't know, children with dyslexia rarely have autism. Some children with autism occasionally will have dyslexia. It's a little more common than the other way around, but either way, to have both isn't very common at all. So when she summarized all three of this diagnosis, she said that obviously ADHD was interfering with his ability to complete his schoolwork, The autism was interfering with his ability to maintain friendships and really connect with people, that he was eager to meet people and he's a people pleaser and he wants to have friends, but he doesn't have that ability to be able to understand how to maintain a friendship. But the dyslexia was severe. He was going into 6th grade this fall, and he was reading at a 1.6 grade level. That is exactly what was holding him back, and that was what was interfering with his life the most. That if we addressed the ADHD and got him help for the social skills for the autism, that he could thrive in the rest of his life with a little bit of help. However, the dyslexia was so severe. If we do not do extremely intense intervention right now, that he will not be where he needs to be to graduate high school. He will not be where he needs to be for the rest of his life to be successful if we do not do some very intense intervention right now. So she actually recommended a dyslexia school. Since Jesse was a strictly visual learner and that was his only real form of being able to learn stuff, she really wanted to focus on a couple of different dyslexia programs that would allow him to learn to the best of his ability. That he needed that dyslexia school 5 days a week in every class. We didn't want to put him in a public education system because of the fact that Jesse was so smart that when you put him in with a class that had below average students in it, that he would honestly believe he was stupid. He would not be able to succeed. And we were also afraid to put him around children with behavior issues. Jesse is very lucky in the fact that we don't really have behavior issues. And if we put him around children that do have behavior issues, there's a good possibility he's gonna pick those up. Jesse's best chance at being successful is through a dyslexia school. So our goal right now is to find Jesse a dyslexia school for him to attend. It's not an easy task to try to research. It's actually really hard to try to find one that'll be a good fit for Jesse, but we've made a short list. What we really want to do is to be able to connect with other people who are in the similar situation as us. We want to be able to learn from them and we want them to be able to learn from us. We feel very alone in this boat as we're trying to figure out what these diagnoses mean, how it's going to affect Jesse, and what type of services we're going to be able to get for him. Especially when that means up and relocating in a different state. It can feel very overwhelming, and we would really like to be able to have our family and friends understand what it is that we're doing, why we're doing this, and what we're going through. We'd really like to be able to have a sense of community, maybe connect with somebody else that has a child with autism or a child with dyslexia, because we honestly don't know anyone else that has a child with either of those diagnoses. And we're hoping that through these videos, you guys can watch Jesse grow and watch him learn and watch him be successful. And we want to learn from other people on how they have improved their lives, what we can try for Jesse that might work and what might not work for us. Either way, I'm willing to give it a try. I'm willing to try almost anything to help Jesse succeed. And I feel like most parents would do that. Most parents would do anything for their child, and that's what we're doing. So I hope you enjoy watching our videos and our future videos, as we plan on uploading at least one time a week. We haven't got a schedule figured out yet, as this is still all new to us. We're hoping to be able to continue this journey for several years. And we're looking forward to watching our community of kids with special needs and multiple diagnoses grow. Thank you all for watching this video, and we look forward to making another one.
Don't worry about a thing, because every little thing is going to be alright.